There are stories that history cannot digest, not because they are impossible, history is full of the impossible, but because they arrive with too many witnesses, too many details, too much consistency to simply dissolve into myth. In the summer of the 12th century, in a small farming village in Suffolk, England, harvesters working the edge of a wolf pit looked down and found two children crouched at the bottom, a boy and a girl, weeping, clinging to each other, speaking a language no one in the village had ever heard, and their skin was green. Woolpit sits in the middle of Suffolk like a nail pressed into old wood, small, deliberate, ancient. Its name means exactly what it sounds like: wolf pit. For centuries, the people of this region dug deep traps at the field margins to catch wolves descending from the forests. By the 12th century, the wolves were mostly gone, but the pits remained, wide, stone-lined, kept open out of habit or memory or something less nameable. Suffolk in this era was a working county: wheat and barley, cattle, the grinding rhythm of seasonal labour. The village centred on the church of St Mary the Virgin, which still stands. Woolpit was not a place where strange things happened. It was the kind of place that made strange things seem impossible, which is perhaps why, when the strange thing did happen, it was recorded not once but twice, by two separate medieval chroniclers writing independently of one another. The harvest was in progress. Late summer, the fields being cut and gathered, when workers at the edge of the wolf pit heard something beneath the normal sounds of work. A crying, they said. Something between a child's cry and something else, something they didn't have a word for. They looked into the pit and found two figures, a boy, younger, and a girl, older, perhaps 10 or 11 years. They were dressed in unfamiliar clothing, the fabric described as unusual, woven from a material no one could identify. They were thin, they were frightened beyond language, and from head to foot their skin was the colour of unripe wheat, a deep saturated green, not a bruise green, not a sickness pallor, green as new leaves, green as riverweed, green as something that had grown in a place where a different sun shone. The two principal accounts come from William of Newburgh, writing in his Historia Rerum Anglicarum around 1189, and Ralph of Coggeshall, writing his Chronicon Anglicanum around 1220. Both men were educated. Both were ecclesiastical scholars with reputations to protect. Both treated the story not as legend, but as documented fact, drawing on testimony from people who claimed direct contact. William of Newburgh wrote that the children were brought to the village and that they wept constantly and refused all food offered to them, bread, meat, the ordinary provisions of a Suffolk household, until someone brought raw broad beans, still in the pod. Only then did they eat. Ralph of Coggeshall, writing 3 decades later, claimed to have spoken directly with people who knew the girl in her adult years. His account carries the weight of someone who believed he was reporting history, not folklore. The children were taken in by a local knight named Sir Richard de Calne at his manor in Wykes. The boy, always described as weaker, more distressed, sickened and died within months, despite the household's care. The girl survived. Over weeks and then months, her skin slowly lost its green cast as her diet expanded beyond raw beans. She learned English. She was eventually baptised. She lived into adulthood and was said to have married a man from King's Lynn. She spoke freely in later years about where she had come from. She called it the land of St. Martin. She said it was a place of perpetual twilight, not darkness, but a light that was dim and constant, as if the sun always sat just below the horizon. There was, she said, a great river of light beyond their land, brilliant and unreachable, on the far side of which other people lived. She and her brother had been tending their father's cattle when the animals wandered into a cavern. They followed the sound of bells, bells that sounded like the church bells of Suffolk, and walked through a long tunnel toward a brightness and emerged into a world of overwhelming light and noise and heat, and they fell into the wolf pit. In Woolpit, the story is neither dismissed nor sensationalized. It is held carefully, the way a village holds anything it cannot fully explain. Local tradition has long connected the Green Children to the ancient landscape itself, to the fact that this part of Suffolk sits above a complex of underground caves and chalk formations, some natural, some of unknown origin. Some in the village have always believed the children came from below, not from another world in a supernatural sense, but from a community of people who had lived underground for so long that sunlight had become alien to them, and their diet so restricted that their bodies had changed. Others hold a quieter belief, that Woolpit was chosen, that whatever the children were, their arrival was not accidental, that the bells they followed were not random, that something wanted them found. Modern scholars have approached the Green Children from several directions, none of them satisfying. The most durable rational explanation involves a condition called hyperchromic anemia, a severe iron deficiency that can cause a faint greenish tint in the skin, historically known as green sickness or chlorosis. Children malnourished enough, eating a diet almost exclusively of broad beans, could theoretically present with this pallor. This would explain the colour. It would not explain the language no one recognised, the unfamiliar clothing, the complete bewilderment at sunlight, or the girl's later testimony about a land of permanent twilight. Some historians have proposed the children were Flemish, immigrants whose parents had been killed and who had fled persecution, living rough and disoriented, their language mistaken for something wholly alien. The historian Paul Harris, writing in 1998, identified a village in Farnham St Martin as a possible origin point, noting the name's resonance with the girls' land of St Martin. Others find this explanation insufficient. The children did not recognise bread. They did not recognise cooked food of any kind. Whatever they came from, it was not a Suffolk village. Two independent medieval chroniclers, both educated, both credible by the standards of their era, both treating the story as documented fact rather than fable. The children's complete non-recognition of sunlight, not merely distress, but apparent physical overwhelm, as if it caused them pain. The green skin that faded with improved diet, suggesting a physiological rather than supernatural origin. The language, never identified, never matched to any known tongue. The clothing, described consistently as made from a material unlike anything in the region. And the girl's account, precise, consistent across retellings, geographic in its detail. She did not describe a heaven or a fairyland. She described a place with a landscape, with cattle, with a river, with a horizon. A place that operated by physical rules. A place that was simply somewhere else. The question that no explanation resolves is not where the children came from. The question is, what was on the other side of the river of light? The girl described it clearly. A luminous country, separated from hers by a great river of light, visible on the far horizon of her world. She never said what lived there. She never said whether it was a place people went or a place people watched from a distance with something between hope and dread. She crossed from her world into this one, through a cave and a tunnel and the sound of church bells. She never went back. But she knew the river was there. She had grown up seeing it. Which means there was a world she knew, and beyond it, another world she didn't. And it is worth sitting with that. The idea that whatever she came from, it was not the bottom of the strangeness. It was the middle. Woolpit is quiet now. The wolf pits are filled or fenced. The fields still go to wheat. The church of St Mary still stands at the centre of the village, its bells ringing the same rhythm they have rung for 900 years. Somewhere beneath the fields, beneath the chalk and the old root systems and the packed centuries of Suffolk soil, there are caverns. Some have been mapped, some have not. The girl, in her adult life in King's Lynn, was said to be cheerful, sociable, normal in every regard. But people who knew her said that sometimes, especially at dusk, when the light dropped to that particular grey amber that sits just before full dark, she would stop whatever she was doing and stand very still and look toward the south, toward Woolpit, toward the fields, as if she were listening for something, as if, beneath the bells of this world, she could still faintly hear the bells of the other one, and had not yet decided which she was waiting for.